It's been a minute. I'm back. We were traveling. We were visiting the in-laws. I did get some writing done, not as much as I would have liked. I wrote 2 screenplays. It's been a busy time. But we're back on track and we're back on schedule. So, with that in mind, welcome to Ranger Stories. My name is Tennyson E. Stead. I am the creator of Jump Rangers, and this is the show where I read things that I'm writing in the Jump Rangers universe and probably edit and discuss them for your viewing pleasure. Today, we're reading Jump Rangers, a game called Conquest, Chapter 17. If you'd like to catch up on previous episodes of Ranger Stories, you can find those episodes on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/jumprangers. Let's begin. Here's what I got from the meeting with High Command. Things will go a lot easier if we can get Admiral Paxis to agree with our plan. I'm not just talking about making things easier for the Sarge and I. If Admiral Paxis is willing to help us, then there's no need for war on Earth. Nobody will go accusing the Mistlings or anyone else of ruining our planet. Lives will be saved. Both the Sarge and I knew that support from Admiral Paxis was a lot to hope for, but it was worth the effort to try. When Scrap introduced themselves to High Command, they proved there were answers to the questions High Command was asking. Knowing that made it a little easier for them to believe in the Sarge and I, and that's what made the difference between them deciding to help us with Admiral Paxis and then deciding the Sarge and I were a few crystals short of an octanator. Talking to Admiral Paxis wasn't going to be enough. We needed to have everything ready first. We needed to be ready to answer his questions. Maybe then he'd be willing to help us. If he's not, it won't be because we were counting on luck to make him see what we see. Before we got to Admiral Paxis, we'd need to find a Spore Queen who was willing to help us save our planet. What I didn't understand, at least until then, was why we couldn't just grab the spores and go. Why do we need to talk to a Spore Queen exactly? Sitting in the steely mess hall, eating fish and vegetables, grown from thermal vents, hidden in the walls of the abyss that Zero Base was perched in. The Sarge, Scrap, and I talked over some basic points that I admit I'd been too impatient to really think about until just that moment. Spore nests are hives, is the answer Scrap gave me. Okay, fine. Spore nests are hives. Back on Earth, we used to have animals that built hives so their queens could lay the eggs and feed the larvae. That doesn't mean we sat down and had coffee with them before moving a hive or seeding a colony. Maybe you should have. See, this is the part where I open my big stupid mouth and say something like, I don't get it. Problem is, I've already learned that mice are actually an intelligent species with a whole civilization of cozy villages built into otherwise hostile environments. Maybe, I said to myself, we should ask Scrap to explain themselves in a less disrespectful manner. So that's what I did. What I learned is that spore wasps may seem dumb and violent, and spore bugs may seem dumb and hungry, but these animals are part of a larger system. None of these bugs really exist as independent animals. Instead, they work as part of a collective. Scrap believes, as most Mistlings do, that the same thing is true of any living thing. Maybe the Saurian horde would be less violent if they understood their connection to the galaxy around them. Spore wasps and spore bugs may not understand much about the worlds in which they live, but they understand their connection to the hive. Everything that grows in a spore hive feels and understands that connection as a simple fact of life. Maybe not everything that a spore bug is doing is something the queen told them to do exactly, but they're all doing their best to fulfill the will of the queen. Like the cells of a body, they're trying their best to keep the hive healthy. When the hive is healthy, the queen can do her thing. For a spore queen, memories are all about genetics. Spore queens inherit the memories of the queens that bore them. Unless there's a spore queen out there who has a genetic mutation or had an accident or something, every spore queen across the galaxy can remember the first spore, and Eden, and where they all came from. If we bring a spore to Earth without asking first, every hive on Earth will have a queen that remembers what we did. If we ask nice, and if we act respectful, then every queen on Earth is going to remember us for doing right by them. So maybe this isn't something we should play around with. On planet Mist, the spores that drove away the Saurians were all descended from the same queen. Even after hundreds of years, the spore queens on planet Mist know who and what the nomads are. All of them will at least recognize Scrap as a nomad, and they'll remember how the nomads acted back before the mistling diaspora. Planet Mist is where Eden told Scrap to look for a spore queen who might be willing to help us out. Here's my concern. I don't think I need that Planet Mist sentence. We know that. We were there. Here's my concern. Spore bugs of all description are attracted to aliens and technology as a food source. Both the Sarge and I are aliens, and both of us have lots of tech. If we leave some tech behind just to make things easier, then we won't have the life support gear we need to breathe clean air. Breathing the milky gas with which let's fix this real quick. Okay. Breathing the milky gas that spore hives are constantly pumping into the air of the worlds they infest makes a person forget all the skills they've ever known. Higher brain functions fade away, and they fade pretty fast. Spore gas is meant to keep animals alive and to make easy prey of so-called intelligent beings. So what do? How do we get around without getting eaten? Acknowledging that these were real problems, Scrap shared some tricks of the trade. We got Ipiluni over here. Hot. I had to turn off the air conditioning because it disrupts the stream because we can hear it on the mic. And now Ipiluni is discovering what I discover every time I shut off the air conditioning in the summer and fall of California, which is that this room heats up very quickly. We have a metal roof. It's unpleasantly hot. I'm doing it for you. I hope you enjoy it. Ipiluni's doing it for you too. You're welcome, says Ipiluni. Where was I? Suiting up, the Sarge and I used our wrench rigs to get small and size down. We don't need to say that. We get to size down until we were eye level with Scrap. With a squash and a stretch and a blinding flash. I like that. Scrap flickered us into an abandoned city on their homeworld of mist. Standing on a rock in the middle of an enormous hollow, we could see a city made of wood and earth woven into the roots of trees. White mist permeates the air and gives the light filling the hollow from the sky an eerie sense of direction. Through the soupy backlit air, we see that most of the city has been chewed to pieces. Burrows and tunnels in the ground suggest the comings and goings of burrowing spore monsters. Burrowing and burrows. So, just holes in the ground suggest the comings and goings of burrowing spore monsters, and grub-like spore bugs are munching. Okay. Even then, grub-like spore bugs were munching at the mistling structures. Munching casually. At the mistling structures. In the still air, we can hear them gnawing through the wood and earthworks. Climbing down off the rock, Scrap leads us through the streets meticulously made from inlaid stone. On all sides, the ghostly remains of a city that must have looked. We are surrounded by the ghostly remains of a city that must have looked. Resplendent in its artisanship. Behind one of the spore bugs, as it crunches and slurps its way through the remains of what was probably a picturesque example of old world mistling architecture, barely accessorized with the business of technology and progress. We find ourselves stepping in a trail of greenish slime. Okay. I repeated myself here. Behind one of the lumbering spore bugs. As it crunches and slurps its way through the remains of what was probably a picturesque example of old world mistling architecture, barely accessorized with the business of technology and progress, we find ourselves stepping in a trail of greenish slime. Dipping their gloved hand in the sludge, Scrap starts wiping themselves down with it. If you don't want them smelling you, then you need to cover your jumpsuits in Katha. Katha? Just for a moment, I considered asking Scrap what that goop actually was. Taking a deep breath, I accepted the convenient fact that so long as I was sealed inside my jumpsuit, and so long as the Katha was sealed outside my jumpsuit, I'd never need to think about it. Kneeling down, I started smearing Katha on every surface of my body and gear. Checking over Scrap and the Sarge, I made sure they were thoroughly Kathed up. With a matter-of-fact demeanor, Scrap did the same for me. Smelling like the back end of a spore bug does, it turns out, tends to keep other spore bugs from sniffing too hard at you. Once we were all smeared up, Scrap led us on a hunt, out of the hollow and out onto the and onto the and out on the out of the hollow and into the forest. With grass rising high on every side of us and a canopy of trees high, high above, towering above. We'll just say towering. Scrap cleaned the muck off my octanator and tied it to the winch line on the harness of my jumpsuit. Unspooling the winch line, Scrap wound it tightly around the stem of a nearby bush and set the octanator on the ground as bait. Hiding in the stalks of greenery and fallen leaves that surrounded us, we waited. Listening, you could just make out the faint buzz of a spore locust. With focus and speed, it descended on the octanator and snatched it off the ground in its mandibles. While the spore locust struggled to yank the piece of tech loose from the brush it was moored to, Scrap flickered right onto the thing's back and grabbed hold of the antennae. Yanking the winged insectoid to the ground, Scrap worked on calming it down. Eventually, they got my octanator free from its mouth. Spore locusts release pheromones to draw the hive to any tech they find. There's going to be wasps and bugs before long. We need 2 more locusts, but the both of you are new. We can catch them later. Now we should go. Nomads had been riding spore locusts for just about the last 1,000 years. Training them is easy once you get a feel for it. Once a spore locust gets used to your presence, it stops spewing pheromones around you and your gear. For the next few days, Scrap, the Sarge, and I were ducking spore wasps and hiding in tree hollows. I've rubbed enough spore bug sludge into my jumpsuit that I don't think the smell is ever coming out. Still, we did catch 3 spore locusts. Mounting an insect is harder than it looks. Insects have pointy parts all over their bodies, and trying to avoid them leads to falling. Lots of falling. Then it starts to feel natural. Training a spore locust isn't much more complicated than just teasing them with some piece of tech until they do what you want. Then you feed them. Keep feeding them, and they accept you as part of the hive. Once that happens, you're in. As a spore infestation spreads across a planet's surface, the hives along the front line stay busy producing spore wasps and bugs to help with the actual fighting and munching. Behind those front lines, older hives focus more on terraforming and the creation of spores to seed new hives. Old queens grow bloated, eating unstable compounds for food, until they eventually become living bombs that blow spores filled with larvae across the planet or up into space. If we were going to talk to a queen, then we need to talk to an old one. Young queens were busy spreading their hives across a planet's surface. Their hives are filled with spore wasps, which are 6-legged flying monsters with stingers and claws that are more than a match for any space fighter. Further in, deeper into the infestation, the hives are less active. Spore bugs feed the queens, and the queens grow new spores. This is where Eden told Scrap to bring the Sarge and I for help. Spore queens are sensitive to psionic fluctuations. Flickering near a hive is an easy way to make the queen angry, so Scrap took the time to teach us how the nomads stay alive on spore worlds. Mounted up on spore locusts, drenched in Katha, we flew past the newer hives of the infestation, past squadrons of spore wasps as they droned angrily through the air, past the fallen cities of the mistlings and shattered saurian colonies, into the silence of the deep, deep mist. And this is the end of chapter 17. I had a couple of notes for myself, but I think this is a pretty fantastic chapter. Don't mind if I say so myself. There's a couple that I know we're going to need some pretty heavy rewrites on, and we'll do those. But I like this. This is a good read. Not bad, Tenny. So we're back. Thursday at 5 p.m. We have the mission files, which is probably not going to be a mission this week. We'll probably do a piece of tech or something. There's a couple of things I have in my notes. I don't even know what we're going to do. I'll look. Maybe we'll pick something if people show up to the stream. Maybe we'll pick something together to develop for the game. If Lucinda's here, then maybe we'll do something with Lucinda. So that's one thing. Saturday, usually at 1:30, although I'm going to talk with Federico. Federico and I are working on another design sprint. We're working on both the Ranger jumpsuit and we're working on the Saurian Warlord battle armor, because these are the last two pieces that we need for the cover image that we're going to be putting out for the Patreon. There's some key art that we're working on, which is beautiful, and he's worked very hard on it, and it's lovely. I'm very excited, and it definitely is evocative of what we're building. It's very painterly, and I'm excited to show you. But there's some work to be done first. So, and he's been going above and beyond to make this happen. So, all thanks to Federico. We may need to make the game later. Usually it's at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Saturday. Don't take my word on that this week. We know that Federico has family duties on Saturday. He does want to keep playing on Saturday. We're going to figure out, or we'll figure out a new day. I'm going to talk to him on Thursday. We'll figure it out. And I'm back on Star Citizen streaming. There's a lot of exciting things happening on Star Citizen. I'm not going to be around tomorrow because tomorrow is my wife's Disney day, as we know. But Thursday and Friday, we should be streaming some Star Citizen, and maybe I can rope Lucinda into that too. So we'll see. I'm glad to be back. I missed this, and I'm going to post this on Instagram as soon as I get off. I have some writing to do this week. It's going to be a busy week, but we're going to get through it. We're going to get settled. I'm going to get my facial hair back. There's a lot of things that are going to happen over the course of the next month. So, thank you for watching. And I will see anybody who wants to come by on Thursday. Please do. Don't be a stranger, Ranger.